So I'm a researcher at Instagram, part of Meta. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've thought about changing our research methodologies to do research with participants on AI who may be unfamiliar with that technology. So let's skip back in time for a moment. Imagine it's the year 1880, you're in the US, and you've just been hired as a researcher to help identify opportunities in transportation. You meet with this family, and you ask about how they use their horse and buggy. What are their challenges? What do they love about it? What could be better? So you might correctly conclude that horses require a lot of space. They can only carry so much at a time, and they ultimately grow old. But as you might have guessed, you would have missed a few things about where transportation was going. So fast forward 40 years, and the answer is not, I want faster horses, as sort of the old parable goes, and as your participant might have said, because in the meantime, there's been a revolution. The motor wagon, the car, the automobile were just around the corner. So you would have also missed the secondary effects of the car, the sprawl away from urban centers, the building of interstate highways, the rapid expansion of trade. So given that a key goal of research is to help us make better decisions about the future, how can we actually do that when we're on the cusp of explosive change? So generative AI, or Gen AI, might be one such revolution. And just so we're all on the same page, here I'm defining Gen AI as certain AI tools that can create new content, like text, images, or video, by using existing content. So for example, a Gen AI platform could write an essay, like ChatGPT, or it could illustrate a scene based on a user's description, like Midjourney. 2 months after the launch of ChatGPT, think for a second, how many users might a regular startup have 2 months after launch? Think about a good guess for how many ChatGPT might have had. It's 100 million monthly active users 2 months after launch, making it the fastest growing consumer app in history, according to a study by UBS. So this remarkable growth signals remarkable challenges for researchers like us. So how can we possibly add value in a space that's changing this quickly and this dramatically? So some of the specific challenges we're faced with when we're doing Gen AI research is rapid change. So what's true today may not be true a year from now or even 3 months from now. Users do not have expertise. There are not droves of participants who are so expert in this space that they can easily see where the boundaries are going to go. And many have no familiarity altogether with what this technology is or does. They may not even have the vocabulary to talk about it. How can users give you useful feedback if they don't have direct experience with something or know concepts like hallucinations? For all these reasons, it's a great time to get creative with the research methods we need to use to meet the moment. So back to Meta. I too will not be revealing any cool proprietary information, but things we've already publicly announced. In late September, Meta, Instagram's parent company, announced the release of 28 AIs with unique interests and personalities. So you can think of these AIs as a new cast of characters, all with unique backstories. So these include, just to paint a picture, Billy, the no BS ride or die companion, played by Kendall Jenner, and Zach, the big brother who will roast you because he cares, played by Mr. Beast. At the same event, Mark Zuckerberg also alluded to something Meta's been working on, and that's the project we're going to talk about today, AIs for creators. Creators are going to be able to build AIs that extend their virtual presence across apps. These AIs will have to be sanctioned by them and directly controlled by the creator. So what on earth does that mean? And if you don't know, that is exactly where our participants began. So I want to revisit these. We're doing research on creators' AIs, potentially. Now let's look at these issues again. These suddenly may feel more real. Like, how on earth are we supposed to do that research? So I took on creator AI research months before we announced the AI characters I showed you on the prior slide. So how on earth are we supposed to get usable feedback from consumers or creators before they've seen any of this? All while we know that their exposure to AI characters and AI in itself is going to change really quickly, that new issues are going to surface as it becomes familiar, that their comfort levels are going to change, their concerns are going to become more sophisticated. How on earth do we get around these? So this is where we need to get creative. We decided to tackle one of these, trying to simulate the passing of time in our work by inviting the same participants back to multiple sessions. So I'm going to flag the limitations of this approach as well, but let me get into how we did it. So first, we decided to take a qualitative approach. So as you may know, qual can be better suited for exploratory questions and seemed appropriate for the newness of this space and the lack of familiarity that most participants were going to have. Similar to an expert advisory board, where a select group of experts offer their feedback, this is sort of the approach we took, but for us, the experts were creators, Instagram creators, or what you might know as influencers. So participants were invited to a series of focus groups every 2 weeks for a total of 6 sessions. Each focus group was about 45 to 90 minutes long, and our initial sessions focused on dyads and triads, so very, very small groups to allow for richer initial conversations. Inviting back the same participants over and over again gave them a lot of time and space to reflect on this concept of a creator AI. Like, what would an AI that's supposed to represent you really mean? So what are some of the key tips we have on how to make this repeated measures focus group a success? So first, you have to make sure you have the right participants. Because we're having them come back session after session, you want to be extra certain that they are the right recruits for you. So in our case, this meant that we had a pre-screening conversation to really make sure that they met the criteria we were looking for and that they could expand on their perspective when prompted. But second, it's also important to have an exit strategy. We all know that they might fit the raw criteria, but when you get into the actual sessions, maybe somebody dominates the conversation, maybe somebody's multitasking. So we structured our payment commitment so that they would be paid a small amount after the first session and the remainder at the conclusion of the series of 6 sessions. So then we could fairly compensate participants who we discovered were not a good fit early on and spend our time with the right participants. So what made this a good approach for our particular project? First, it gave us a ton of flexibility. I don't know if anybody here has ever worked on like a lightning speed, fast evolving project, but it's very tough to predict what you're going to need 6 weeks in the future, which is kind of the cadence of a lot of good research. So by holding sessions every 2 weeks, we were able to focus each session on the learnings that were most urgent to the team at that time. Importantly, because we were changing our focus as needed, we were able to deliver the insights in time to the team for them to actually action on them. It's not like the research was coming well after the decisions had been made. Second, having participants for such a long time meant that we needed to be smart about what we wanted to learn when. So in that first session or two, it's the only time they would be able to share their unadulterated thoughts without being swayed by the concept we were going to be presenting them. So this meant that those first sessions, we got to focus on their core needs and challenges, not really thinking about AI. So what takes up most of your time when you create a post? What parts of your job are the most repetitive? What would you be willing to outsource and what would you not be willing to outsource? In the next session, we then moved on to asking about how AI specifically could address some of those issues. And then finally, later, we introduced the creator AI concept and learned about their initial reactions. However, because it's a pretty new concept, we wanted to give them additional time to let it sink in. By a few sessions later, they were so familiar with the creator AI concept that they were in a much stronger position to be able to give feedback on sound feedback on granular parts of the experience, like onboarding, how they'd want to train their AI, what kind of settings they would want to control it. So this approach gives you the chance to learn quite a bit, from very, very foundational things to the very tactical things. And success. So as with anything totally new and unfamiliar, we did see some knee-jerk responses of confusion and discomfort. And that was sort of mixed with lasting concerns that we would need to address. If we had held only one session with these participants, we would not have been able to understand which of their concerns were about what was unfamiliar versus which were core needs we would need to address in the product. So by having them come back session after session, we were able to disentangle which were those non-negotiable needs and which were early growing pains around AI that we think might dissipate over time. Okay, so as with everything, this approach has limitations. So it's important to note them early and often and be very clear with your stakeholders about what kind of inferences we can make here and where we should be cautious. So first, we have the usual limitations of focus groups. The sample might not be representative. You might have groupthink or consequences of groupthink. Having a larger group might increase your risk of leaks. So depending on the project you're working on, that could be a concern. And also having so few participants makes it hard to identify subsegments that might be important. But on top of that, there are these new concerns from repeated participation. So participant bias, where participants might tell us what they think we want to hear, might be more likely after multiple sessions. But personally, my biggest concern was around the mere exposure effect, where simply being exposed to a concept over and over again makes it more desirable. So when we observed participants becoming more excited about the creator AI, was that meaningful change, or is that just the mere exposure effect? Like, we can't really tell. And finally, there are still going to be limits of what this could predict about the future. So despite lots of useful insights, a few hours of conversation is not going to be able to predict all the changes we expect to see over the coming years, especially around the secondary effects of AI. So despite these limitations, we were able to meaningfully and hopefully for the better, improve product plans to better align the creator AI with creators' core needs. So although no one in 1880 could have fully predicted the impact of the automobile on the world, being thoughtful about our approaches in research can help get us an inkling of where the world might be going. As researchers, a big part of our expertise is knowing all the tools in our toolbox. When should we use qual? When should we use quant? When does it need to be in person? When could it be online? So as we look ahead to future research in Gen AI, we should feel free not only to look across our toolbox, but to be prepared to invent new approaches of our own. Can you upskill your participants instead of recruiting users of Gen AI today? Can you hold a repeated series of focus groups to watch comfort change over time? What do you need to know, and what is a limitation you can live with? You are the expert. Get creative, and you can meet this moment.